When you're a sensitive, smart or creative person, you tend to take righteousness and fairness very close to your heart. It also means that you're far more likely to take the rules of daily life much more seriously than most people do. So where does that come from, and what can you do when it gets in your way? That's what we're going to look into today. My name is Crystal Vogels, this is the Ship Psychology channel, and we're here with another piece of PsychoTrivia. Our daily lives are governed by all kinds of basic rules that we learn from a very early age. Things like don't be late, or prepare your work, or don't interrupt people when they're talking. From the very moment we're old enough to understand language, that is what we're told, and often even sooner than that. So what is the importance of these rules? Because sometimes they can rub you entirely the wrong way, and you don't really understand why this would be a rule. So what happens here is that these are what I like to call captain's rules. Captain's rules are rational rules that are simply there for the sole purpose to organize our interactions with other people. Things like don't be late are important when you're herding 30 people into a single room for example, class or for a meeting, and you want everyone to be there at a roughly specific time so you can organize. So these rules exist to organize our interactions with other people. They are not social rules as such because they are constructed for and by our rational captains. Picture a whole sea full of different kinds of ships, and they're all going roughly the same direction, but they have different speeds and they have different things to do and they have different interests. And when they all have to move together to a single direction, for example in class or in a meeting, that is when their captains, their rational captains, agree with each other. Okay, you take that lane, you take that lane. That way we don't get into each other's wakes and we all know where we're going. And this is more or less the speed that we're going to be going at as a group, as a fleet. If that sounds like traffic rules, you got it, because that's exactly what it is. The captain's rules of daily interactions are very much just traffic rules. Agreements that we have on a very rational basis and nothing else. So how is it possible that when you are a sensitive and when you adhere to the rules as much as you do, that you do feel that it's the end of the world if you're just 30 seconds late to a meeting? Why does it feel that you broke some cardinal rule, some basic, essential part of life structure when you don't prepare your work, when you haven't finished your homework? That has to do with the fact that in people who are especially creative, smart and sensitive, they tend to have a very strong first mate. And our first mate has a very different idea of these rules than the captain does. Because these rules, these traffic rules of social interaction are rational rules. And our captains know that this is to organize things. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just meant to make sure everyone's going in the same direction. But to a first mate, these rules have a much stronger value. They have much more weight because your first mate is your social brain. And your first mate is also the one who wants to keep others into account. They want to, they empathize with others, so they want to do what is not just best for them, but also best for the rest of the group. In part to ensure your own social inclusion, but also simply because you care about others and you want what's best for them. You want what's best for the group. That is inherently who you are. So here's a first mate who gets the rule, don't be late. Don't be late because it's socially not acceptable to be late. You have to be there at a certain time. Say the other captains. And your first mate's like, oh, Okay, so this is apparently an important rule. An important rule as being part of a group, being part of a social structure, which I want to be because I want to be included, I want to be part of that group, is to be on time, to not be late. Okay, so the moment your first mate gets distracted, they lose track of time because your first mate has very poor sense of timing. That's not their job, that's a captain's job. But your first mate tries very hard to keep in mind, oh, not be late, not be... And you get extremely anxious about trying to keep a deadline, trying to stick to a deadline that is not natural for your first mate to adhere to. When will you have noticed this most clearly? As a kid. Because children, and how that's figured out, that's a video for another time, but children are predominantly governed by their first mate. In fact, until they reach puberty, about 13, 14 years of age, a child's captain is not active. So that's why children don't have this concept of time. That's why children think like a first mate when the captains around them, all the adults, give them these captain's rules. And the adults who teach us, they know that it's not the end of the world if you're late for class once. But to young children, that is how it feels, because they're governed by their first mate, and your social, emotional first mate has no concept of the real weight and value of these organizational rules that the captains make. So, what can you do with this information? Next time you find yourself anxious and stressing out about not meeting a deadline, not meeting an expectation, maybe you don't get things organized in time for. When you notice that, take a moment, it's not the end of the world if you do, take a moment to look at what is exactly being asked here. When it's purely an organizational thing, chances are that it's not that much of a problem if you fail to meet it completely to a T, or if you deviate from that rule for a bit. For example, one of the captain's rules in a classroom is that you don't get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of class. However, if you are bursting and you do get up and you do go to the bathroom, that's not the end of the world. Yes, when you get back, your teacher may address that. Look, why didn't you plan that better? Why didn't you go before class? Because that is really what they want. So why is it that people make such a hassle about breaking captain's rules? If someone doesn't adhere to them strictly, why do people get angry about that or upset? And that's because these captain rules are organizational rules meant to prevent disturbances in a process. Captains simply don't like to be disturbed. They don't like processes to be interrupted. And when someone does interrupt, they will address that. They will say, look, I don't like that. But needs must. And the deckhand's needs can override whatever captain's rule. A first mate, they are required. They are trained, and that's what we learn in school. We're trained to fit and adhere to the captain's rules. That doesn't mean that they're holy. That doesn't mean that you are a bad person if at any point you divert or choose to this once ignore the rule. So when you encounter this in your life, when you feel that anxiety, take a step back and have a look. What is happening here? Why is it important or not so important that I adhere to this specific rule, and how much leeway do I have? Because especially if it's purely for organizational purposes, it is preferred that you adhere to those rules. But if you can't, or if it's better for you not to, that is okay too. It takes some effort to find your way in that, but you will find that when you get a better sense of which rules to stick with and which rules are can be bended a bit more like guidelines, as Captain Jack said, you will find that your anxiety about meeting people's expectations and deadlines are going to go down a lot. You will feel much more relaxed about dealing with that sort of situation. That's it for this video for today, and I hope to see you in the next one.